And I really grew up with this idea of like alcoholics and normal people.
Yeah.
And it really does, having that frame in mind changes, I think, how willing we are to walk in a certain direction or to look in a certain direction.
Here we go. Okay. Today we're talking about why addiction thrives in silence. And I guess there's quite a lot to this. This might involve us talking a bit around why someone would want to be silent. What does it even mean for an addiction to thrive? But yeah, why lots of us feel like we don't want to talk about it, or why we maybe have some shame, the kind of stigma. Although there's no doubt that things are getting better. There's still a bunch of stigma about addiction, I think, that's no doubt out there. And, terms like addict, terms like alcoholic, these kinds of things, people I understand they don't want them. They reject them. They don't want what they come with at the end of the day. And so people keep quiet, right? And they kind of suffer in silence. And I think this is something that's really worth talking about, because I know for me, like if I'd have started, I don't know, like I guess it just plays out the way that it does. Like if I'd have realized that I had an issue earlier, then maybe I might have done something about it earlier. But one of the things is it's so normalized, especially with alcohol. It's kind of very easy to hide in plain sight, and not even realize that you've kind of got an issue for quite a while, because the degree in the UK, and I'm sure this is the case in a lot of places, the like heavy drinking, binge drinking, or is kind of just pretty normal, right? So yeah.
Way of life. Like I know for me in college, it absolutely was. Like it was just the normal thing to do. It wasn't like that. For me, what's interesting in the like addiction thriving in silence idea is after I realized I had a problem, still feeling alone. Like there is something about alcohol that makes us feel completely alone. The number of people I've talked to who have been like, had some version of, well, it was easy for so-and-so because of this, or it was easy for someone else because of this. Like it makes us feel like our own predicament is so intensely insurmountable. And I think a lot of that comes from this like unspoken sort of path that we've been on. So whether it's realizing that you had a problem in the first place, or there was something to address in the first place, to denying that for a while, like a big part for me. And, certainly I remember in college, like I knew things weren't right, but I didn't really want to, admit it. I really wanted to, I don't know, just kind of pretend it didn't exist. But that set off that pattern of being sort of suffering through this alone that really kind of grew into a much bigger problem this time around.
I think, people don't want to talk about it because I think there's this phenomenon where if talking about it kind of makes it real, and like if you make it real, then you might have to do something about it, and then you might have to stop or whatever. Like there's this kind of stuff that can go on. So I think there's that can definitely be playing out for people, but that requires some degree of kind of consciousness around what's going on. And for me, like it's weird. I can remember being, I don't know when this would have been. This was probably, I basically made the decision that I needed to knock it on the head when I was about 26, and then it took me a little while to figure it out. A couple of years of just throwing everything at it, trying to figure out what to do. But it must have been before. So it must have been before that. I remember I'd had like time off, and periods off and periods on and periods off, and I was very aware that with other things, other substances in my life, that they were massively skew-whiff and that it wasn't good, and that but I don't know, it kind of hadn't occurred to me with alcohol. I remember going to see a friend who I hadn't seen for ages, and we used to hang out a lot in our early 20s when we were like proper full-on wreckhead phase. And basically this person was still doing what we'd been doing. And I had, in terms of other substances, I'd slowed down. And so when I saw what this person was up to, I was like, fuck. And I remember weirdly having a conversation with them that night. And they said to me, yeah, I'm not so much worried about any of this other stuff. It's this that I think is the issue. And they held up their a can of beer. And I can remember thinking, really? Like, you think that's an issue? And there's no doubt at that point in my life, like I was, massively big, heavy drinker, all the rest of it. But I know this sounds kind of weird, but it was just like this massive blind spot. It had never occurred to me. I mean, maybe I just didn't even want to look at it, but it hadn't occurred to me in the way that it had with other things, that it could have been problematic. And I do think that a large amount of that is because it's pretty easy to just go out twice a week and go and hang out with a bunch of people that are getting absolutely battered. And it'd be so normal for that to happen that it just hadn't occurred to me. And then at some point, I think it got worse and worse, and then it sort of got to a point where the writing was on the wall. And then I dared to look. And then when I started looking, I sort of realized, oh shit, yeah, there's a lot of people that kind of think like me and see it like me. But I think a lot of it was because of this dynamic we have, this very like, the kind of the over there are the kind of like people that get labeled alcoholics or addicts or whatever, and then everybody else is over here. And I think in a world where that weren't the kind of common story, and it is changing, but in a world where the story was more akin to the reality of grey area drinking and addiction spectrum, people with varying degrees of being addicted or not, through from some people who drink occasionally and it's just not an issue, through to people who drink a lot, drink quote unquote alcoholically, but wouldn't ever want to go near that languaging or anything like that. If we were in that world, would I have been more likely to look at it? Probably. I think a lot more people who arguably aren't addicted, don't drink that much these days, are looking in this direction because they're like, well, maybe I'm going to feel better if I drink less or don't drink anyway. And I think that's a result of culture changing. And I just didn't grow up in that culture. Like in the 90s in the UK, where I was getting a lot of my messaging around this stuff, that absolutely was not the culture. There was fucking no one taking months off of booze and doing like dry Januaries. It just wasn't a thing,
Well, the only people who did that are people who had a problem, right? Like
but it definitely wasn't called that either, right? Yeah.
Yeah, but it was never framed as maybe I'll feel better or this would be good. Like even saying something like, I want to do it just to prove to myself I can, which that was stuff I definitely heard. Even in college, I heard it. Like even that is like rooted in this idea that in order to take a break, you must have an issue, right? If you need to take a break, then there's a problem. So it's easier to just not need to take a break. It's easier to just not look in that direction. I felt the same way. My family, there's addiction in my family, like my father and a lot of his side of his family, and the other side too, I suppose, but it's kind of everywhere. And I really grew up with this idea of like alcoholics and normal people. Yeah. And it really does, having that frame in mind changes, I think, how willing we are to walk in a certain direction or to look in a certain direction. Mm-hmm. And so it does deny it. And it's like this extra layer of impediment, to like moving forward, because in order for me to do this, or at least this is what I thought, like in order for me to change, I had to admit that I was an alcoholic. I had to admit something and take on a label that I really didn't want to. Yeah. And so it was just much easier for me to kind of cram that down in the back of my head. Right. And just meanwhile, like as we said in the title, addiction thrives in that sort of mindless environment. I don't mean mindless in terms of like reckless. I just mean it in terms of like, I'm not thinking about it. I'm not allowing those thoughts to sort of bloom.
Yeah. And I mean, that's the worry, I think, is that dynamic of, and I understand what people like, the things where, like, what does that dynamic even mean? At what point does someone become quote unquote an alcoholic or whatever the word is, where they tip over the edge? And even the word addiction is kind of defined in different ways by different people. But basically, because we have this situation where a lot of people are like, well, I don't want to get labeled with that stuff. Meanwhile, they're kind of drinking a lot. And I know a lot of people in my life, and this is pretty common. There's many, many people who are going home and drinking a bottle of wine a night, or even even to so there'll be people
Yeah.
listening to this thinking, fucking hell, only a couple of bottles. Like I get it. Like this is the state that we've kind of got ourselves into. um and there will be people that are doing that, and just going out at the weekend and getting on it, party prescriptions, all the rest of it. And it's just, and they're slipping more and more into this kind of like problematic, uh, this kind of situation where they're relying more and more on alcohol or whatever the substance happens to be. And it's kind of easy to be like, well, I wouldn't ever end up in a really serious situation. But if you talk to people that are, if you talk to people that have kind of got the kind of like Hollywood rock bottom, if you want to think of it in that way, like where they've kind of lost the job or lost the, you talk to those people, there's almost always how to put it, there's an event that happened. There's like they did lose a job unexpectedly
Yeah.
or something like, they're leaning on that thing, and then it kind of ramps up. And so I think people, we're, without realizing it, we're kind of closer to like falling more and more deeply into those kinds of patterns with drinking or whatever it is. Like we're closer than we might know, particularly if we're relying on it to kind of help ourselves emotionally. And I just know that there's a lot of people that are kind of, suffering in that bracket, who don't know who to talk to because their mates, like, there's that phenomenon again where you look at all your mates and we compare our insides to other people's outsides. So we look at all of our all our mates and we go, well, we know Scotty, okay, like he drinks a bit too much at the weekends or whatever, but most of the time he goes home after 2 or 3 drinks or whatever. But you don't see what's going on behind closed doors for people. You don't see what's going on at home. It's and then you can kind of use that to your advantage if you feel like you're starting to slip. It's interesting, my experience, it's quite common that we can start to isolate. So I know for me, as my drinking got worse, I would actually drink more at home on my own and isolate more. And then it's not that I
Hmm.
wouldn't go out, but I would sort of know what would happen if I was going to go out on a Friday night. So I'd stay at home and just have a few beers. And then if I managed to keep to 4 beers on a Friday night or whatever, I'd go out and celebrate and drink twice as much on Saturday. So there was never really
Yeah.
a benefit from that for me personally. But I think there's a lot to this. I think we just need to know that it's safe to talk about this and that it's not I think, as Laura McCowan says, addiction is an experience, not an identity. And we really need to
Yes.
talk out against it, about the shaming that's going on of people that get caught up in this stuff.
It's funny you bring up that not knowing what other people do thing because I weaponize that in its own way. Like I went in the other way instead of like I assumed that everyone else was going home and having 5 drinks on top of what they had. So like that was like my rational, like, oh, like everyone does this.
Yeah.
Zero evidence. I didn't have evidence of this other than my own experience. So I took my own experience and I was like, oh, everyone must do this. Or my friends who I knew did it, I'd be like, oh, see, he does it or she does it. It's amazing how that can happen. And yeah, I love the idea of it being an experience instead of an identity. And I think that points to, I think, why this entire conversation about addiction thriving in silence happens. It's because like we treat it as some, I don't know, as some horrible affliction and not just a
Yeah.
thing that happens to us because we're human and we have human brains.
Yeah, that's it really, isn't it? Like, why is it that addiction thrives in silence? And yeah, it's because for exactly what you just said, like it's just this, it has more of an opportunity to kind of incubate and grow and become something, as where if we were more able to talk about it. And I think this is the whole point of like trying to get people talking, trying to get men talking, trying to get everybody talking, right? But we have this real epidemic of guys just not talking about how they're feeling and that kind of thing. And then they like lean on alcohol or whatever, which then becomes its own kind of like self-reinforcing perpetual cycle and all this kind of stuff. It's yeah, exactly that. And I think one of the reasons we're putting together a video like this is because hopefully if one person hears something like this, maybe they'll talk to someone that they trust, or I don't know, go and get some support, or come and talk to us or whatever before they might have done, before I did. It took me absolutely
Yes.
ages before I was able to. And so if
Or,
one
or
person
at
hears
least
this,
watch another video.
yeah, That's
you
it.
know,
Well,
like
that is it.
at least
Yeah.
keep investigating. Yeah. Sorry, go
That
ahead.
is getting no, that's it, man. Watching another video and like I can remember when I first started looking, it was just an exploration. It was just that kind of. It's funny. I have had a number of calls with people who I don't know if you've ever had this, who have sent me a message when they've been absolutely blotto, where they've been like wasted out their head, and then they've been looking for a solution, and then they've forgotten that they've done it, and then they've got an
Yep.
email from me or something like that saying, "Hey, are we good for this call tomorrow?" And they're like, fuck, I don't remember. Like, this must have been the other night. And we get on the call and we talk
Yep.
about it. And they're kind of like, yeah, shit, I sort of got to a point where I couldn't hide from this anymore. And like, ironically, under the influence of the substance was when I kind of was like, fuck it, I'm just going to reach out and have this conversation. But it takes courage to do that. It
It
does
does.
take courage to reach out. And I remember when I first started Googling online and having a look, and, you know, before I was ready to start kind of talking to other people about it, there is something really helpful. I mean, the moment you start looking, well, there's a few things that strike me. The moment any of us say, I think I need a break, that's kind of a shift, because up until then, like, it
Mhm.
hasn't even occurred to us, right? The moment any of us think, God, fuck, I think I need to talk to somebody about this or whatever, like, there's a real profound shift there. And like you say, like,
Yeah.
this stigma that we have around addiction, man, it needs to do one, because the idea that, you know, it doesn't really care what you do for a living. It doesn't care, you know, these patterns that we can fall into are, as you say, they're kind of centered around this very human thing that's happening where we don't know that it's okay to experience what's coming up. And so we look for kind of innocent ways to kind of escape it or fix it or not go there, or to attempt to generate feelings to take us out of the experience that we're in. And so
Yeah.
for some people, that's alcohol. And for other people, it's other substances. And depending on society's view of the substance depends on how much you get stigmatized. So if you're unlucky enough to like end up in a pattern with heroin, you're going to get heavily stigmatized, because that's like a really, you know, how, you know, this is like the worst of everything and all of that. But it's so much of it's just story and culture. You know, alcohol happens to be a difficult one to, ironically, you know, that thing like it's the only drug you have to defend not taking, to
Yeah.
less of a degree now. But it's not like you have to defend not taking crack. It's not like, you know, when did you last smoke crack? Oh, you know, I don't. Oh, come on, mate, don't you be such a boring bastard. Like,
We all know. We all do it. Yeah.
smoke some crack. They, but we do have these really warped, upside down stories about these different substances, and so yeah, you know, and it changes from culture to culture and country to country, and depending on and families as well, the perception that they have. But I think, you know, out
Yeah.
your like in America and the opiate crisis, and like so heroin might be more of an issue in working class areas, but there's plenty of people in middle class areas, and I guess the lines are all being blurred that have been caught up in the opiate pandemic,
Absolutely.
and then they fall
Yeah.
into
Yeah.
using street drugs because they can't get hold of prescription drugs. Like, it's not only, you know, it's something that we need to talk about together, because it's a human thing, and whether or not it's, you know, falling into a pattern of use of alcohol, or whether it's gambling, or whether it's compulsive spending,
Yeah.
or whether it's any of the things that we can get caught up in, it's the same root. It's the same core
Yeah.
root that's impacting us all. So it's a collective thing we need to talk about, right?
And that's why I mean, having this conversation, we can start to destroy that silence.
Yeah.
Like, I love the idea of normalizing getting stuck with something, because again, we're humans and this happens. I love the idea of, you know, well, you mentioned the opiate crisis here, and it's so funny, 'cause, you know, this has obviously been going on for a long time, but it's really funny to go back maybe like 15 years and look at some of the news stories about it, because like, it was a quote unquote certain type of person who was getting
Yeah.
addicted to this.
Right.
And then
Yeah.
all of a sudden these stories come out of nowhere about, like, you know, soccer moms and dentists and lawyers, and it suddenly moved. And I think this was obviously, that whole like framework is rooted in a prejudice about all of this, but like part of what it has done is blown that up so that we can look at it this way. And I think that conversations like this and us talking about where we're stuck with things, first of all, it like eliminates that silence, so that there is a space for people to walk into, so that there isn't a space for that addiction to thrive. Because as soon as you start talking about it, as soon as you bring that into awareness and start working on it and whatever that is, right? Whether it is videos or a course or, treatment center, right? Whatever the hell it is, like you're tearing down those walls. And that allows us to access the really human problem that's beyond all of it. And I know this is a different video that like alcohol is a symptom, but like this is a barrier for us as a culture. And by this, I mean not talking about addiction of whatever. It's a barrier of us to address some of the deeper things that might be causing it in the first place. So the more open we are, the more this conversation we have, the less that stigma holds, and the more sort of in touch and, I don't know, connected and human we can be.
Yeah, it's maybe a nice place to kind of wrap this up in that, yeah, the more we just talk about it in our own way. I know for me and you,
Mhm.
like we're very public. You can't get much more public
Yep.
than the ways that we talk about this. And I had people around me that were
Yeah.
like really afraid for me. When I started talking about
Same.
it, they were like, well, keep a lid on that and don't talk about this bit, don't talk about that bit. And yeah, but it's funny because with every degree of kind of vulnerability or sharing, the next level of like being okay with that, I'd get another round of people saying, thank God you said that, because when you actually just kind of shared from the heart, I was like, oh yeah, okay, I connect with this person. Like you look like me, or
Yeah.
like you're kind of saying that this impacted you, even though you didn't come from this background or that background or whatever it might be. And like we just need more of that. We need, because there's plenty of people that don't look like me. There's like we all need to be able to kind of see people that we resonate with, or kind of have a shared, that we've walked some of the same road, to go, oh yeah, this
Mm.
person's been struggling with this as well. And so with every person that does that, and sometimes it's just talking to a mate, sometimes it's literally just
Dude.
talking to a mate about it. It doesn't have to be coming and broadcasting shit on YouTube or whatever. Like it can be
No.
talking to a friend, right?
I mean, I have a story like this myself, and you've probably heard of it countless times too, of like, someone realizing, kind of waking up to the fact like, oh, something needs to change. And then there's someone in their life who they have a quiet conversation with. It's not,
Mm.
it's not this big public thing. They don't start a YouTube channel about it,
Yeah.
but they
Yeah.
do, like, they do start to open up, and someone opens up to them. And that's all it takes. Like, all it takes to be that, to like start to shift. Because as we start to shift, as we start to like see this stuff, as we start to have this conversation, things open up, and things open up in between us. But the more of us there are out there talking about it in whatever form, the less of a barrier this whole silence thing becomes.
Yeah. That's it. And on that note, we do free calls. So if anyone wants to come and like once a month, we do like a free
Yeah.
get together where you can come and just sit there and come and say hey, and just a Zoom call. They're open to anybody. We'll put the link in the show notes, or the YouTube description wherever you're catching this. And yeah, like just come and hang out with us, and you can kind of just sit there and just be with other people that are kind of walking a similar path. And just something like that can make such a profound difference. Or watching another video, like Scott said, or pinging us an email, or whatever. I remember basically the whole thing started changing for me when I read Hip Sobriety by Holly Whitaker. And I remember I read a post. I've
That's
probably still
great.
got it tagged somewhere. Well, I mean, prior to the book, it was just So Quit Like a Woman was
The
her book,
blog.
wasn't it? But the blog, yeah. I mean, I don't think it's up
Yeah.
anymore, but the first post I read was something like, are you scared to quit drinking? And I read that, and it was the pulling of the golden thread where which everything started unraveling. And was it all simple and easy, and did it happen immediately? Absolutely not. But I don't want to, I don't know where I'd be without it. I have no idea where I would be if life hadn't moved me to start questioning and thinking, fuck, like, is this the best it's going to be? Like, do I have to keep struggling like this? Do I have to keep suffering in silence? And how can I
Mm.
start thriving rather than this addiction thriving in me? Like what's the what's the route out of this? All those kinds of questions. So just do one small thing. it might completely change your world. And use your common sense. You know, if there's people that you don't want to talk to about it, talk to someone that you do want to talk to. If it makes more sense to talk to someone you don't know, talk to someone you don't know. Like you know, you don't have to go broadcasting it anywhere.
Yeah. No.
Yeah. Right. On that note,
That feels like a great place to leave it.
Yeah. Awesome. Right.
All right,
Scott.
See ya.
Peace.